And so when we combine that with our yoga practice and the practice of moving our body in very intentional and mindful ways, and then incorporating the breath as well, it creates a meditation or a mindfulness in motion. And that effect is so powerful. And it doesn't mean that you have to have been practicing yoga for a set amount of time, or you have to be a certain level of practice and of discipline to understand or experience that. This is for anyone. It's that simple act of stepping onto your mat, into your body, into the present moment. And as cliche as it may sound, it is truly, truly transformational in allowing us to just simply be with what is. And that doesn't mean that it has to be great, just being able to sit with whatever feelings that are arising, whatever we're going through in the moment. That mindfulness aspect that we learn through a yoga practice is incredibly grounding and anchoring. And as I'm saying this, of course, I think we're all hearing it through the lens of what we're currently experiencing as a planet.
I'm Casey Main, a jaded, hopelessly romantic, health-conscious party girl searching for meaning. And my mission is simple: to make life better, for myself and for you. I believe real change always comes from within, and the Better You podcast was born to discover hidden parts of ourselves and our stories. A safe place where we have real, honest conversations with people from all walks of life to help better understand ourselves so we can become better versions of ourselves. So come along on this journey of discovery with me so you can become a better you. Welcome back to another episode of the Better You podcast, where we focus on better understanding our relationship with ourselves. I am your host, Casey Main. I just want to thank you very much for listening. I know that there are a million podcasts out there that you could be listening to, and you've chosen to listen to mine, which I so very much appreciate. And really, I hope everyone is holding up okay with everything that's going on right now. My cousin made a comment to me the other day that really kind of stuck with me. She was joking, but she joked that quarantine was kind of fun at first, and now it's really starting to wear on her. And I totally get that. It's kind of like at first it was almost like a forced vacation, and I think a lot of us almost welcomed the extra time to just basically Netflix and chill. But the longer that this is going on, and we are all starting to get a little bit stir crazy, and the longer we don't know how long this will continue to go on, like the more stress and anxiety it's causing. And then you add on top of it the very obvious, very real, very scary economic implications. It's a lot of change at once. It's a lot of uncertainty and questions and fear at once. And it's a lot to handle. So I really want to make sure that this podcast is serving you all during this time. And today's episode focuses on principles from yoga that can really help in all of life, and then especially times of uncertainty. But I looked back through the previous episodes, and I wanted to call out ones that I think could really help in a couple different areas where I know people are struggling right now. So if you're feeling stress and pressure to use this extra time to work on yourself, and I know that sometimes I can maybe be part of that messaging, and I by no means want to be causing extra stress or making you all think, oh, you've got to spend all this time to do all this self-work. Basically, you have to spend all this time to do whatever you have to do to get through it. So if you're feeling stressed and pressure to just dive into all things personal development during this time, then definitely listen to episode 9, How to Ease the Stress of Self-Care with Dr. Megan Weigel, episode 22, How to Optimize Your Life with Lee Rankinen, and episode 32, The Body Image Battle with Irina Gelman. All of those episodes discuss and approach self-work with a lot of acceptance, non-judgment, and just basically allowance to just be wherever you are. And we talk about that in today's episode as well. If all of this quarantine and social distancing is causing issues with your relationship or your dating life, then consider listening to episode 15, Meeting Needs in Relationships with Dr. Chrissy Overstreet, episode 26, Know and Release Your Shame Message with Marnie Batista, or episode 30, Rethink Love with Monica Berg. And if you're just feeling general like extra stress and anxiety, then listen to episode 23, Meditation to Reduce Stress, Increase Focus, and Rest Your Brain with Monty Shomali. And there's a bonus episode right after that one where he leads us in a short meditation. Episode 24, Living in the Moment to Overcome Anxiety with stand-up comedian Steve Rogers. And episode 38, Understanding and Addressing Our Holistic Self with Dr. Erica Matlock, which is actually the episode just before this. At the end of that one, she really goes through a very specific example and advice to give for how to deal with added anxiety given everything that's going on right now. And today's episode will definitely help as well. Our guest is Ashton August, and I first connected with her when I started writing for her site, Yogi Approved. And it was just so wonderful to connect with her even more and actually like talk to her and hear her voice. Ashton is the founder and editorial director of YogiApproved.com, a leading yoga and wellness digital magazine. She is also the founder of YA Classes, an online yoga and fitness membership platform that plants a tree for every class a member completes. Ashton is a female entrepreneur on a mission to inspire, empower, educate, and cultivate community both locally and globally through her work as a motivational speaker and published author, distinguished yoga instructor, and business owner. And in this episode, we talk about yoga as mindfulness in motion and how it can help keep us grounded during these uncertain times, how awareness of thoughts coupled with self-compassion is a cornerstone of developing mindfulness, how intentional breathing can help bring us into the moment and reduce stress and anxiety, the power of setting an intention for our yoga practice as well as our day, the importance of self-compassion and being okay with where we are, both in yoga and in everyday life, how focusing on a steady point can help us get through the uncertainty of our days, the importance of acceptance and releasing control, and finally, what yoga can teach you about your relationship with yourself. Before we jump into this conversation, I do want to encourage you all to visit the shop page of my website, caseymain.com/shop, where you can find a list of companies and brands that all make natural, clean, organic products. You can find pretty much anything you would need, from shampoo and conditioner and skincare to deodorant and house cleaning products. And most of them come with a discount for being a listener of the podcast. So again, that's caseymain.com/shop. Please check it out. I'm just very happy to be able to bring you all discounts for these wonderful companies that are dedicated to producing products that aren't secretly harming us. I will link to the shop in the show notes as well as all of the episodes I recommend listening to that I mentioned earlier. All right, that is it. Let's go ahead and jump into this conversation with Ashton. I hope you enjoy. So let's first learn just a little bit about you and kind of your story and your background and how you came to starting Yogi Approved.
Yeah, absolutely. I began Yogi Approved in 2015 with my then boyfriend, now fiance, Tyler. And we started it in the floor of my Scottsdale apartment bathroom. And the whole vision came about because I had started teaching yoga several years prior, but had also gotten my master's in creative nonfiction writing. And so I was teaching yoga full time. I was also an English professor and loving both of those things, but was really wanting to find a way to bridge the two passions of yoga and writing. And meanwhile, Tyler was working in a corporate job as the director of marketing that, he loves marketing, but the job itself was not making his soul sing. And he was so hungry to get out and do something that filled him up and inspired him. And so together we created the concept of Yogi Approved. And as I mentioned, that was in 2015. And it started as a fun, passion project on the side. And it was really just one of those things that I thought it would be a yoga blog so I could share my passion and he could help with the development and the design and all of that. But quickly it started to grow and the traffic was growing exponentially. And we realized, hey, this is something that we could really be of service to the world and use as our vision for what we want to do and be in life. So we both stepped off the ledge and we quit our jobs. I, of course, kept teaching yoga, but aside from that, we stepped off the ledge and fully committed to it. And that was in 2015, and we haven't looked back since.
I absolutely love that. I love that because I guess I have a similar story of jumping off the ledge and quitting my job. And I'm by no means at the success level that you guys are at, but to like hear those stories, it's just this reminder that when you start something just because you're truly passionate about it, it can really take off and be a legitimate, successful business. Because now, I mean, you guys, you're much more than a blog. Like you offer a ton of online classes. Like it's grown like exponentially, I'm sure.
Thank you for that. And yes, it has. We started as that blog, and we are now a global yoga and wellness online magazine. We also offer online classes, as you mentioned, and that's called YA Classes, short for Yogi Approved, of course. And that we have hundreds of online yoga, fitness, and meditation videos. So it's so beautiful to see how the business has evolved and taken a life of its own these past years. And also we're just so grateful to be able to offer up, these things to the world and see the success that it has brought, not for us, but for the ultimate good of perpetuating yoga and the benefits of that. And especially, with everything the world is going through currently, it's as valuable and beneficial as ever. So,
oh my God, absolutely. And even just the fact that, I mean, you guys offer the virtual classes. I mean, that's, there's what's happening right now with this pandemic is just crazy on so many levels, but the forced push of businesses into some level of the virtual space is one thing I think that will maybe end up being a good thing, these more like virtual options. But I mean, you guys are already like well-versed in that. So immediately, like right out of the gate, when places started to be able to shut down, you're like, hey, listen, we're already doing yoga classes online. I know I saw on y'all's like social media, I think that you were even partnering with other yoga studios to help them during this. So, I mean, it definitely is extremely relevant right now.
It is. And yes, thank you. It's been humbling, and we're so grateful that we've just been able to offer something in support, during such challenging and uncertain times. And it's been great that we've been able to partner with local studios and offer something for them and their following. And it's been an interesting journey, that's for sure.
Yes. Well, I've been so excited to talk to you because I have a little bit of a history with yoga. My mother and I both started taking yoga back when I was in high school. So
I love that.
I guess sadly now that's like 20 years ago. And that was like our thing when we went to this. It was power yoga. So I think it was vinyasa style yoga. Absolutely loved it. We went all the time. I then went off to college, tried to find a yoga studio, couldn't. And then I got out of it. But my mother has continued. I mean, she has been doing yoga now for 20 years or so. So she is a total yogi, but I lost touch with it. And it's one of those things that I know I want to do. I know what the benefits are. I know it would be a good thing to start, but I haven't fit it back into my life. And so I'm really hoping that this conversation, and I was even actually thinking this time of life where we're all being forced to slow down and reevaluate our schedules and our habits could be the point of time where I finally bring yoga back into mine. So I want to really talk about yoga and all the different benefits and principles within it in general, but then also how it can be helpful during these, as you were saying, very stressful and uncertain times. And you mentioned, and I can't remember if I heard this on another podcast interview you were on, or if you wrote it somewhere, but that yoga is mindfulness in motion. And I just loved that. So can you explain a little bit about like what you mean by yoga as mindfulness in motion?
Absolutely. I love that. Thank you. That's such a great point for you to have pulled from all the things that I have written and spoken on yoga over the years. And I will make my way quickly back to answering this, but just to touch back on you doing yoga in high school, that's awesome. And good on your mom for that, and that she's still going strong. I love hearing that. And we are offering a free month of online yoga worldwide to support everyone in quarantine. So I hope you also take advantage of that, Casey. I think that a home practice has been what's keeping me grounded these past few weeks. In fact, I don't think I know that. And for so many of us, so that being said, the reason to me that yoga has been so grounding and such a calming, comforting force during these times and in general is that mindfulness aspect. And what mindfulness is the simple act, and Casey, I know you are so well versed in this in your Buddhist philosophies, but mindfulness is the very simple act of becoming fully present in the moment and also in whatever you are doing in that moment, whether it's washing the dishes, taking a walk, anything we do in our lives, we can make mindful. And that practice is incredibly meditative and potent and allows for that presence to really take over. And so when we combine that with our yoga practice and the practice of moving our body in very intentional and mindful ways, and then incorporating the breath as well, it creates a meditation or a mindfulness in motion. And that effect is so powerful. And it doesn't mean that you have to have been practicing yoga for a set amount of time, or you have to be a certain level, of practice and of discipline to understand or experience that. This is for anyone. It's that simple act of stepping onto your mat, into your body, into the present moment. And as cliche as it may sound, it is truly, truly transformational in allowing us to just simply be with what is. And that doesn't mean that it has to be great, just being able to sit with whatever feelings that are arising, whatever we're going through in the moment. That mindfulness aspect that we learn through a yoga practice is incredibly grounding and anchoring. And as I'm saying this, of course, I think we're all hearing it through the lens of what we're currently experiencing as a planet.
So I hear you on the fact that it doesn't matter where you are in your yoga journey, if you're taking class number 1 or if you're, been doing it for 20 years, like my mother. I still think though that mindfulness component, coming actually into the present moment, into our bodies is very difficult just in general. And even I think in yoga, because, you can be going through the motions, but, your mind is bouncing all over the place and you're thinking about the laundry you've got to do when you get home, or whether your kids completed their virtual schooling. So is there something about yoga that helps us come into the moment more so than in everyday life? I know there's a lot of focus on breathing in yoga. Why is yoga, I guess, more helpful in helping us develop that mindfulness?
That's a great question and such a valid point, because when I mention all of these, I'm not saying it's easy. It's certainly not. And that's why we call it a practice, because it's a consistent practice. And even if you have been stepping onto your mat, like your mom, right, for 20 days of consistent practice, she's still going through that grocery list in her head or thinking about the laundry she has to do when she gets home. But
she definitely is.
You're like, I can personally vouch for this.
Yeah, if you know my mother, yeah, she definitely is.
And so many of us are, though. But that's the beauty in it, is over time, when you step on the mat for your first ever yoga class, you might get a 10-second glimpse of that mindfulness, and that's your gateway drug, and then next time you get a 20-second glimpse, and now you're building momentum, and now you're excited to continue coming back for more. But the practice of the yoga and the mindfulness aspect within the yoga is that simple awareness beneath the mindfulness of, oops, my mind slipped and now I'm thinking of something completely outside of my yoga practice. I'm just going to bring it on back. And that is where the practice really begins, is when we're able to have that awareness of, never mind. It's okay. I'm just going to bring myself back to where I started and begin again. And then we combine that with the compassion of being okay with that. Because I think for a lot of us too, we beat ourselves up. Why can't I stay present? How come I can't stay focused on the breath or on this pose or whatever it is? So when we add that layer of compassion and we allow ourselves, to get distracted, to come back. This is all part of that overarching lesson of mindfulness. It's not just the art of being present, it's the art of knowing when we're not.
Yes. Yes. Which is what they say also about meditation. You know, so many people think meditation is you're supposed to clear your mind, but that's kind of unrealistic expectations. It's more notice when your mind has veered away from the current present moment, your body, your breath, and then bring it back. So it is building that muscle of awareness of just even knowing that you're thinking, because so often I think our minds are moving so quickly, we're not even really realizing like what we're thinking about or that we're even thinking.
Oh, absolutely. And in yoga, we call this the monkey mind. And it's that incessant chatter from the 50 or 60,000 thoughts that we have in any given day. And being able to remove ourselves from that chatter, that is the goal of meditation, mindfulness, and yoga. But again, like you said, it's not the goal of having this lofty, perfectly silent experience where you're levitating 3 inches off your yoga mat meditating. It's more so just the goal of if you can create that pause. And then maybe the pause gets longer over time. But another part that you touched on that I wanted to circle back to is those key tenets or key principles in yoga that we practice as ways of incorporating that mindfulness, one of which is the breath. And in my opinion, the breath is the most important, because just like how we talk about how the mind is constantly racing and we have all these thoughts constantly fleeting in and out of our heads, same with the breath. The breath is done obviously automatically in the body. We don't need to think about it. It's done involuntarily, but there's different ways that we can breathe. And oftentimes when we're in that sort of stressed state of rush, 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 go, 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 all these thoughts, we're breathing very shallowly in our chest. It's just this shallow inhale, exhale. And so I invite everyone to just take a moment now and tune into your breath with no judgment, but just being aware of how that you've been breathing now. And it's probably kind of a natural state unless you're stressed out or maybe you're relaxed, from our really awesome yoga podcast. And but when you become aware of your breath, you can then become aware of what you need in order to get more present. So let's all try it. Take a deep inhale breath through your nose. And then just a nice deep sigh out the mouth. And even that one round, you might feel a little different. For me, that made me feel more grounded. So when we can take nice, deep, conscious breaths, that is a huge, huge, soothing comfort for the soul. It's also very, very grounding. And it's also a key tool in our yoga practice. In yoga, we call conscious breath work pranayama. And prana means life force energy or chi. And so we are harnessing this life force energy within us through the breath. And it's key for yoga because we use the breath to move to the motions. I know, Casey, you said that you used to do power vinyasa. Mm-hmm. And vinyasa is the practice of linking breath to motion in a continuous flow. And what a beneficial practice that is. That's that meditation or that mindfulness in motion again, when you can inhale, bring your arms up, exhale, bring your arms down, and it becomes this rhythm. And when you move combined with the breath, it becomes a really simple yet potent formula for presence. So I'm all about that pranayama, girlfriend.
Yeah, it's funny because breath work is something that just keeps popping up in my universe. Like I had a listener recently send me this TED talk that this guy did on breath work. And so now you're talking about breath work. And actually my boyfriend and I were talking about it, how we originally were nose breathers, but we've kind of evolved and now we're all breathing out of our mouth. And kind of if you were to breathe in through your nose and then out through your mouth, that like circulation would help clear out stuff. And so I do believe there is a lot of power in breath work because to your point, we don't pay attention to it. And when you do kind of it is usually just very shallow. We're not necessarily really filling our lungs or our diaphragm or really taking all the oxygen in.
Exactly. And the more oxygen you take in, the better it is for your brain and thereby your thoughts and your thought patterns and the quality of your thoughts, and through that we activate the nervous system and we're activating the rest and digest instead of the opposite of like that stress-based state that we so often function from. So any time that we're feeling a little ungrounded or fearful or have stress and anxiety, stopping, getting a nice firm grounding to the earth, whether you're sitting or planting your feet firmly to the ground, and taking just 3 deep and full inhales followed by exhales, it will do a world of good for your mind state.
Yeah, it's so funny. It just hit me that this is something we know, but we don't actually, I think a lot of us don't actually practice. Because think about it, when someone starts to freak out, you even say, all right, take a deep breath. But they don't take a deep breath. But where did that saying come from? Probably the fact that it actually can calm you down.
Yeah, probably the fact that is actually one of the best pieces of advice you can give someone in that moment.
Yes. Okay, cool. So pranayama, breath work, that's one of the key components of yoga. What is another one?
So another one that I love when we're talking about this practice of mindfulness too is intention. And in yoga, we call this sankalpa. And in yoga, we typically will set an intention at the beginning of our practice. If you go to a class at a studio, the teachers will often, offer up an intention or invite you to set your own. And that can be anything from as simple as a word like focus, presence, peace, strength, whatever you want, to something that you're pursuing in your life, like I am grounded, I am safe, anything like that, or the intention to just keep your mind present and be compassionate when it starts to wander, and have that be the intention. But my point is, when we take that moment to set an intention, and as I say this, we can also apply this to our lives off the mat as well. We are taking a moment to ritualize the experience, whether that's our upcoming yoga practice, whether that's the day ahead, if we're setting an intention for our day over our morning cup of coffee. And so after we take that moment of ritual, we then sort of solidify this energy behind the intention that we're setting. And now we have the opportunity to pull that through, whether it's our practice or our day. And it's a way to keep us grounded. So again, applying it to our yoga practice, if we set the intention for presence at the start of class, and then, okay, we're your mom, right? And our minds start to go to the laundry. As soon as they do, we go, oh, nope, presence. And we just bring it right back to the intention. And then 5 minutes later, same thing, mind starts to wander. Oh, nope, intention, bring it right back. So it's another awesome tool just to help you, always anchor your mind back to that original point of what you wanted to get out of your experience that day. And I see people pull these intentions into their lives in different ways too. Some people like to get tattoos, so it's visibly there forever as a reminder. Some people like to.
That's what I've done.
Same. I'm looking at one right now. Yep, there's one. And in fact, it's fittingly called Release Your Plans. So that's one of my favorite intentions because it's so relevant.
Oh yeah, I got one that says let go.
Oh, perfect. I was just about to say, what do you have?
Yeah. No, I love intention. And I've probably over the past year or so have realized the power of it just within our lives, because so I understand for a yoga practice, but kind of bringing that up a level just to life and our days, especially these days, maybe we start to set an intention, and first thing in the morning, it's all right, today I'm going to be informed, but not freak out. Or, today I'm going to spend more present time with my children after they're done with their virtual school. But it's without it, we're kind of flying blind or on autopilot. And I think it also helps that when things get difficult, you come back to that intention, just like you were saying. So you're on the mat and your mind goes to the grocery list. You come back to that intention, which is this reminder of, oh yeah, this is my purpose for this practice, or this is my purpose for this day, which it's like that center point to come back to. But it seems almost like it's no big deal, but I've started doing it. I can't remember, I read in some book, but the intention was, and I just loved it. I wrote it on a sheet of paper and I have it on my nightstand. So I can't help but look at it first thing when I get out of bed. And it's,
good idea.
Today I shall judge nothing that occurs. And there's something about reading that and thinking about that, first thing in the morning, that I'm oh yeah, okay, I'm going to be accepting, I'm going to accept reality, non-judgmental of everyone and myself and blah, blah, blah. And it does really help.
I love that. And I love that you put it next to your bed, because I think that's such an important way to start your day, is because we all have the choice of how we want to start our day, right? We can hit the snooze button 5 times, which is ever more appealing these days. Or we can make the decision to not, and to step out of bed, set that positive, empowering intention, make our bed, and then get on with our day, And that's what I was going to offer up too. In addition to people getting tattoos, or like you writing it on your nightstand, I always love to write messages on my mirror with like a whiteboard marker, or, leave a little sticky note. And same thing, just that way to get your mind right first thing in the morning. And in setting intentions and intentional living go hand in hand with mindfulness and mindful living, of course. And intention, if it seems daunting, intention can be as simple as the evening before you go to bed, or in the morning before you start your workday, just writing out your top 3 things that you want to check off the list today. Setting an intention as simple as that even is a great place to start.
Yes. No, I love that you brought that up, because your intention doesn't have to be anything, profound. Like, I shall judge nothing that occurs today. Like, have you heard
but yes,
it was I think Glennon Doyle talk on, I think it was an Oprah Super Soul Conversation, but she talks about how when she was in like a really bad place, and then she went to yoga, she went to like a hot yoga class, and she was super skeptical at first, and everyone's going around the room setting her intention. And it was all this, peaceful and radiate light. And she was like, my intention is to like make it through this class without running out the door screaming, or something like that. And the yoga teacher was like, that's perfect. And that's all she did. She didn't even try and do the yoga. She just sat on the mat in the heat and like had this amazing breakthrough. So it's like, our intention can be things like, I'm not going to flip off and like yell at my husband today. Like, that is my intention for the day. Like, it can be completely like unique to you.
Yes. And like you said, custom fitted for whatever you're going through in that moment, that day, the current chapter in your life. I love that. And I think it's very important with any of these principles, whether we're talking about yoga or philosophy in general, whatever, is to just start with where you are. We never want to talk about any of these things as if it's some huge lofty goal to work towards. We always just want people to feel like, you can meet these concepts where you're at. And if that intention is as simple as not running out of the room screaming, then perfect.
Yes. And I love that. And I want to go back to because you spoke a little bit about compassion, and that's one thing I remember. And I have gone back to yoga several times over the, past 20 years. Like, I didn't just leave it and not go back, but one of the things I love about it is just the concept, and in every class, like no matter what type of yoga class I've taken, they talk about how like, this is your practice, like you're on your mat. And if you need to go to child's pose, like go to child's pose. So there is this overall theme of wherever you are in your practice is exactly where you need to be, and like no comparison and no shaming yourself for not being able to do certain poses, but that self-compassion of I am where I am, and like, I'm okay with that.
Absolutely. That's a huge chunk of yoga. And it starts with the physical, right? It does start with that. If this pose is too intense for you, modify it, skip it, take a break, take that child's pose. And it starts there. And then you also begin to learn it transcends the physical, and it can be with your thoughts. If your mind does, get distracted, if you do forget your intention, compassion is key, not just in yoga, not just in, Buddhist philosophy and concepts, but in life as a whole. We've got to be softer. We've got to, practice kindness to ourselves, because if you don't have the compassion, then, the rest of these concepts that we're talking about, they go out the window too.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's especially important these days. I was listening to a podcast this morning, and they were joking about how, everyone is like, oh, okay, well, take this time to eat really healthy and start working out and work on yourself. And of course, I'm part of that messaging as well. I understand that. But I think it's also important to be kind to yourself. So however you're getting through these stressful times, if it involves a day where you never get out of your pajamas, you do nothing but binge watch Netflix and literally never open your door, then don't beat yourself up about that. Like, self-compassion and like being okay with wherever you are in the process, I think is so difficult for us, because we kind of live in this comparison always moving forward society. But I think it is like such a key that opens the door, like so many of these bigger concepts of self-love, like it starts with just being kind to yourself with where you are, like in that moment.
I love it. That is the golden nugget from our conversation today, Casey. That is the key takeaway that we all need to truly practice right now. And as you said that, it reminded me of one of my favorite quotes on gratitude. And it is, gratitude is the gateway to all abundance. And the same can be thought of as compassion. You know, compassion is the gateway to all these other principles of mindfulness, of coping, of, you know, anything we're going through in our yoga practice and our lives with all the current situation around the, you know, the pandemic. There's so many aspects where compassion is key. And let me tell you what, I have been a huge part of that same messaging as you. You know, this is the time to be healthy and also go inward and really, you know, do the self work and commit to that yoga practice and do all the things, you know, that are not just good for you, that we've all been wanting to do and maybe been putting some of it off, but it's such a key thing for coping right now and for getting through this time. But all of that said, if you're not there yet, or if you're not there now, that's not just okay. That's what you need to accept and embrace, because that's the reality of the situation. And I love you giving permission to binge watch Netflix, never get out of your PJs. Like, the point is, do what you need to do and honor whatever you're feeling. And that takes us back full circle to when we started this conversation. Whatever is coming up, whatever you're feeling, we need to be able to sit with that in order to process and work through it. Because while there's always a time and a place for pouring yourself that glass of wine or two and, you know, doing whatever you need to cope. Also, though, when you are genuinely ready to begin the work of processing, of moving forward, of stepping into the, you know, release that comes after we've had that time to process and heal, we need to do that too. So just every step of the way, having that compassion for ourselves first and foremost, so we can then have that compassion outwardly, because, you know, everyone's going through this right now. And that's the comfort that I'm finding in our current situation. It's unprecedented that everyone around the world is experiencing, you know, the same feelings, the same uncertainty, the same challenges in our lives. And, you know, so collectively, we're really in this together.
Yeah, we definitely are. And yeah, I realized this a while ago, and it's been mind blowing for me that, you know, we have to accept where we are, because that's the only way change happens. Like, you only move forward by accepting where you are in that moment, which seems almost like counterintuitive, but like, it's true. But then I think another important component of that, and this kind of circles back to intention, is you've got to be honest with yourself about why you're actually binge watching Netflix. Like, if it really is what you need that day, that's different than you're escaping whatever feelings you don't want to feel or whatever. Like, it's this weird combination of like awareness and self-honesty, and then self-compassion layered in there.
Absolutely. And so isn't it an interesting time that we're able to truly take on all of these things at once?
Yes. Yeah, definitely interesting. Okay. So intention, I love that one. What is another key component?
So another key component that I think is really fitting right now is drishti. So in yoga, we hear and we talk a lot about the drishti, which is a point of focus. So again, starting with the physical, the drishti is a physical point of focus that you set your gaze on while you're in a yoga pose, or specifically like a balancing yoga pose that requires a lot of concentration and focus in order to hold it. So if you were going to take, say, dancer pose, let's say a beautiful balancing pose where you're balancing on one leg and foot, you would set your drishti on something in front of you that's not moving, like a yoga block or a water bottle or something like that. And that gaze, that locked gaze, will help you find that internal focus and thereby that external concentration and ability to balance or maintain the pose, or, you know, whatever it is. And so in yoga, I love that. It's such a powerful tool, the drishti. But when we're applying it into our daily life, that drishti, it can be similar to our intention, right? It gives us like a serious focal point to set our gaze or our focus or our energy on. But it also, it's reminding me of what my mom used to say when she was riding motorcycles. She would always say, you have to look beyond the curve. So if you're riding a motorcycle and you're about to take a big turn, you don't look straight down like at your handlebars. You look beyond that curve, and that's how you take that turn on your motorcycle. And I always loved that, because if you're looking out beyond the curve, what you're doing is obviously you're aware of where you are right now. But what you're also taking into account is where you want to be. You're setting your gaze there. And then you're taking the necessary actions and steps to get from where you are now to where you want to be. And that's done through intention, mindfulness, intentional living. It's interesting how all of these tenets tie together.
Oh, yeah. I just had like a little aha moment of...
I love those.
Yeah. So it's kind of like, all right, so it's like intention is kind of the driving force behind us. The mindfulness is us in the present moment. And then the focal point is like where we're heading. So there's like behind exactly where we are and then ahead of us.
Exact past, present, future. I love it.
Yes. Okay.
I love it. I literally busted out my journal. I was like, I got to write that down. That's really good.
Oh, I love that. And I think, so also I wrote down as you were talking, so you have a fixed gaze on something not moving, which I know because I've done yoga. And so when you're holding the poses and you're balancing, you want to fix your gaze on something, and that helps you balance. But I had never really thought about the emphasis on the fact that you're picking something that isn't moving. And so that in itself is like, I don't know, some level of like grounding or comforting that yes. there is still stability. While you're wavering, like there is still stability in the world. So now I'm trying to think of like during these crazy times, what could our focal points be? Like what is stable? Well, I guess like this something. So I love to watch the sunrise. So like, well, now the beaches are closed, yes. But going to watch like the sunrise, like that is something you can count on that happening every single day. Like the sun will rise, the sun will set. Like that is a stable thing that you can rely on no matter what is like wavering in the rest of life.
So true. Absolutely. Absolutely. And, as you mentioned, like everything's, as we're unwavering, what is that drishti we can look at for grounding? And that reminded me of these sayings, storms make trees take deeper roots, for any Dolly Parton fans out there.
Yes.
I just had to interject with that. But you're absolutely right, is finding something small like that we can rely on. And you have been like the sunrises, that's your thing. And for me, it's just been taking it. And again, if this sounds cliche, that's fine. It's not for me. It's been very profound, taking it moment by moment, not even day by day, but even pulling that back down to just living moment by moment, because I know that we are all so impacted by what's going on and how everything is changing and everything feels uncertain and up in the air. And I can't tell you the amount of things that I've had, planned that are canceled or, postponed with future date to be determined. And all of those things just sort of crumbling between my fingers with absolutely no control of mine over the outcome or over that happening. It has been such a profound teacher to me as someone who, and I know I'm not alone when I say this, always has that impulse to control, right? Mm-hmm. I always want to control the situation, the outcome. It has been such a profound teacher to let that go, to truly release, hey, getting back to my tattoo, release those plans. Yeah. And even sometimes taking it day by day isn't even enough. So moment by moment has been sort of my credo, my mantra these past few weeks. And that drishti of just setting my gaze on this exact moment. What in this present moment can I do to, what do I need to get done to support myself, to support my loved ones? And just taking it like that, that's been hugely helpful to me.
Yeah, this is absolutely an enormous lesson in control for everybody. And I'm hopeful that will be, one of the positive takeaways from all of this. And I think that's hard. And I've written about this before on your site, and that's where we get, I don't know, we start to learn more about like what we're actually like really attached to. And it's like, we want to control things because we want them to be how we want them. And we're attached to the ideas of how we think things should go. And then trying to let go of all of that is very difficult. But I think in order to get to a place of true present moment and self-acceptance, you have to let go of all of that, because plans and expectations, that's all future stuff. Like none of that is in the present.
You just said it. You're so right. And for all of you listeners out there, Casey has some amazing articles on Yogi Approved and all very fitting for these times. So I would highly recommend that you check those out on our site, because those have been wonderful, Casey. So thank you.
Thank you. I love that I get to write for you guys, because it's where I get to like kind of play on my spiritual side, which I don't get to write in that realm very much. Like those aren't really the articles Pop Sugar is looking for. So I really love that I get to kind of dive into the Buddhism and like the different spiritual stuff on your site, because I absolutely love all of that.
Oh, good. Well, we love it too. She just put out a Buddha quotes article, you guys. It's a really awesome read. So check that out. Shameless plug.
Yeah. Thank you. No, I will support that shameless plug. Okay. So what other larger life concepts do you think are really prevalent in yoga that could be helpful for us during this time, or in life in general, but especially during this time?
Yeah, well, we started to touch on it, and I wanted to just kind of fill it in a little more, and that's acceptance. Like we were starting to say just a moment ago, these times are teaching us this lesson of presence, of letting go and releasing the urge to control, because guess what? We definitely can't control anything going on right now. And so acceptance is another huge piece of the equation for what we're dealing with now, and also in our yoga practice. And one of my favorite sayings is, with acceptance comes release, because we aren't able to release that urge to hold on to and control and dictate the outcome and all these things until we accept the fact that we can't. And yoga is such an amazing teacher for this, because, these physical poses will absolutely show you your edge, your limit, where you are, today, or in your practice, or in your body. And you're pretty much forced to accept that, because your body is going to, show you what it can and cannot do and where you have to stop. And our yoga practice is the practice of honoring that. And so, acceptance, like an example would be, if you had a wrist injury, you would learn pretty quickly accepting the fact that you're not going to be able to practice, down dog, let alone handstand for the time being. And how do we approach our practice differently when these things happen? So I think acceptance is a huge lesson that we learn on the mat through the physical poses. And then we take that beyond our yoga practice and we apply it to whatever it is we're dealing with in our lives. And again, not to focus just on the current situation, but since it is such a pertinent situation that we're all going through, and such a great example of all the lessons we can gain from it, acceptance is huge, because I think everyone's in this weird place where there's a lot of unease going on. We're not really sure, how things are going to pan out, when they're going to pan out. But all we can do is accept where we are currently and accept the help and support that we're getting from, ourselves and our practices, and also those around us.
Yes. Okay. I love that point about how, all right. So you're right. A yoga practice is absolutely going to show you where your limits are, because the poses and the stretching, I mean, you can relax all you want, but like your muscles are only as flexible as they are like at any given point in time. So it is going to show you where your limits are. And then to your point, you're going to be forced to accept that, let go of being able to control, what your body necessarily can and can't do. But then it's like, it forces you back to the things that you can control, which is the breath work, focal point, and intention. So it's like, it circles back to be like, yeah, look here, you can't control this, but come back to like the only three things you can control really in all of life.
Exactly. You just summed it up in a nutshell so well. Exactly. And it's beautiful really, as we're discussing this, because I didn't think about this ahead of time, but it's beautiful how all of these points are so intrinsically woven together. like you said, it's like this full circle. Acceptance brings us all the way back to the beginning of the breath work and of the intention and all these things. So it's beautiful to see how they all come into play together. And it's also, it's a pretty good realization when you can come up on the acceptance and accept it.
Yes, exactly. Accept the acceptance. Oh, okay. I love that. All right. Well, I want to close with this might be a super easy question, or it might be a little bit of a difficult one. You can have more than one answer, but I'm just curious if, since this podcast really focuses on better understanding our relationship with ourselves, in your experience with yoga, what's the biggest lesson, or a few of the biggest lessons it's taught you, like, about yourself?
That's a great question. And my first answer would be revisiting a lot of what we've touched on briefly, which is yoga is like a mirror, right? So our physical practice is like stepping onto the mat and looking straight into the mirror, which is fitting because typically we do have a mirror when we practice. But what I mean is you come face to face with yourself and also all the things within that maybe you've been not willing or not ready to face. And so, like we talked about, acceptance. If you are a person like me who has a hard time releasing the urge to control, then when you step onto your mat, you're going to very quickly realize that, because you are going to be trying to control the poses or your expectations around what you're able to do in a given pose. But quickly, you're going to be humbled in realizing you can't. Mm-hmm. And so it begins to bring to surface and bring to light these aspects of ourselves that, perhaps there are parts of ourselves that we've not been wanting to face or to really show up and do the work yet. It also teaches us the beautiful parts of ourselves. It shows us our power and our strength. It also allows us to witness this progression of our practice over time and to see what has changed, evolved, transformed since our early days on the mat. And that can be super, surface level physical, like, oh, my heels are closer to the mat in down dog than they were last month. That's awesome. It can also be the deepest level of your personal identity and realizing, wow, when I first stepped onto the mat, I was so rigid, I could barely, bring myself to practice. And now I'm softened and I'm open to the experience. And it reminds me of an example of a yoga teacher I used to teach with. And she started teaching after years of struggling with alcoholism. And when she first came onto the mat as a yoga student, she could not bring herself to look at herself in the mirror. She literally could not face her own reflection in the mirror. And she would set her mat up in the very back corner of the room, purposely behind as many people as possible, so she couldn't see herself. And yet over time, as she kept showing up and coming back, she would move her mat a little closer to the center of the back of the room and then in between the mats in front of her, so she could get like a little glimpse, maybe just of her shoulder, And over time, she makes her way to the front. And over time, she's staring herself dead in the eyes. And now she's this incredible yoga teacher who is teaching from that lens of her experience and her journey. And what an incredible journey that was to witness and to hear about. And now as we're talking about this, it's just such a beautiful example in my mind of this journey of the relationship with yourself and through yourself in the lens of yoga.
I absolutely love that. And it reminds me of, this was a very early episode I did of the podcast. It was with a therapist, and the title of it is How the Body Remembers What the Mind Tries to Forget. And we talked a lot about EMDR, but one of the things she mentioned is that, once you expose a wound, like in your psyche, like deep in yourself, your body is you're going to heal it on your own. So I think sometimes people think, they totally avoid acknowledging any issues they might have or any pains or whatever, because they think it has to be this really difficult process of self-work. And some people go that route, but her point was that more once you just expose it, then, and it might be a slow process, but like you will heal yourself, like the exposed wound will heal itself. So It doesn't necessarily always have to be, all this therapy and all this self-work and all this reading. Like it might just be kind of pushing yourself a little out of that comfort zone to notice, oh, wow, look at that. Like I can't even look at myself in the mirror. And then you don't necessarily do anything other than, allow that to be. And then over time, as you start to feel more comfortable, like as you're healing yourself, she's moving the mat, she's moving the mat. And so like that could have taken, 10 years of therapy, or she just kind of worked through it in a different way. So I think sometimes people shy away from, quote unquote, the work because they think it has to be really difficult. And I don't know that that's necessarily the case.
I think that's such a valid point. And it's like we talked about earlier, right? We just want to meet people with where they are currently and make it as accessible and approachable as possible. And you know what? Let's be real. Doing the work, it does require commitment and effort, and it's not always easy or light, and it can get a little gritty. However, what lies on the other side of that is freedom. And it's absolutely worth the work you put in. And what I love about yoga is, therapy is awesome and necessary for certain people in certain situations. Other outlets are, effective for other people and their needs, journaling and all these other approaches you can take. And then for some, like you said, yoga. And either way, yoga is an awesome layer to add to your self-work, but also just to your day-to-day. How about just to your movement or your fitness regimen? There's so many aspects of yoga that just ask you to take it for what it is and for what you need at this moment. And over time, it will evolve with you and your needs and where you're at. And that's what I love about it. And that's kind of like that full circle, neat little bow of yoga and your relationship with yourself, is that wherever you are currently in your life, yoga meets you where you're at. And wherever you go and evolve from this point forward, yoga grows and evolves with you too. So it's never something to be mastered. Like we talked about earlier, it's always a practice. It's never something that you finish and now you're done. It's beautiful in that it can be this lifelong companion.
I love it. That is absolutely the perfect note to end on. Tell everybody where they can learn more about you and the site and the classes that you guys offer online and just all the things.
Absolutely. Yes. Well, first of all, thank you so much for having me, and thank you to everyone for listening. This was so enjoyable and I loved it. You can find my articles, Casey's articles, and thousands of other incredible articles on yogiapproved.com. We focus on yoga, meditation, and wellness. And we also offer so much more. In addition to that, as I mentioned at the beginning, YA Classes is our online yoga and fitness membership. And we are currently offering 1 free month worldwide. And if you go to our website, you'll see all the instructions for that. You can connect with us on social, Yogi Approved and YA Classes on Instagram and Facebook. Personally, my name is Ashton August on Instagram and Facebook. You can find me there. I would love to connect. I would love to hear from you. Last but not least, I am also a writer and a published author, and my book, Learn, Grow, Shift, is a 30-day workbook for personal growth, and it covers all of the tenets that we spoke on today. It's an incredible journey of self-work in a very fun and approachable manner. And I've been getting so many people reaching out to me talking about how helpful it's been during this time. So I offer that up for what that's worth to anyone out there. And I'll close by thanking you so much again, Casey, for this opportunity. I really enjoyed our conversation today.
Oh my God, me too. I was so looking forward to this, and it even exceeded my expectations. Thank you so much for coming on.
Oh, good. Well, it was my honor, and I hope it won't be the last time.
Yes, definitely. All right, that does it for today's episode. I think I'm actually going to bust out my yoga map, go on to yogiapproved.com, sign up for the free month, and try and start a yoga practice. I think that is both what my body and my mind need right now during all of this craziness. I hope you guys enjoyed it. I hope you got a lot out of it. I would love to hear your feedback. You can always reach me at thebetteryou.podcast@gmail.com or through any of the socials. Please follow us at The Better You Podcast. We are on Instagram and Facebook. Definitely go on and check out my shop and consider supporting these amazing companies producing amazing products. And I think that is it. Thank you so much for listening. I hope you all have a wonderful rest of your day.